At Christmas dinner, my brother discovered that I own a coffee company valued at $90 million. Within seconds, my parents demanded that I sell my shares, split the money with the entire family, and hand the CEO title to my brother. Because, according to them, he deserved it more than I ever did. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I smiled. And I answered with one sentence that shut the entire table into silence. But before I tell you what I said and what it cost them, I need you to understand how a family can love one child so loudly that the other one learns how to disappear. My name is Dominique Shaw. I'm 36 years old, and tonight, for the first time in my life, I'm done being quiet. For over 20 years, my family never once asked what I actually did for a living. They assumed I was still the broke barista who could barely cover rent, the daughter who meant well, but never quite measured up. They never questioned it, never checked, never looked close enough to see the truth. And honestly, that part wasn't an accident. Because the first thing you learn when you grow up invisible is how to stay that way. Everything changed the winter I turned 7. That was the year my younger brother Chase started getting sick. It began with asthma attacks, violent ones that turned his lips blue and sent my parents rushing him to the hospital in the middle of the night. Then came pneumonia, 3 hospitalizations in 4 months. Steroids, nebulizers, emergency room visits that blurred together into a constant state of panic. Doctors told my parents to keep his environment as clean and controlled as possible. My parents heard something else entirely. They read an online pamphlet, some outdated medical article, and decided that older siblings could trigger asthma flare-ups simply by carrying normal childhood viruses home from school. From that day on, our house stopped being a home. Air purifiers roared in every corner like jet engines. Furniture was wrapped in plastic. The smell of bleach burned my eyes the moment I walked through the door. Hand sanitizer bottles sat on every surface like decorations. And a rule appeared overnight. If Chase coughed, if he wheezed, if he ran even the slightest fever, I was gone. My mom would grab the same faded blue backpack, stuff in whatever clothes were closest, and drive me straight to my grandfather's house on the far side of the suburbs. Quick hug, no explanation. Then she was gone again, back to monitoring Chase's oxygen levels. Sometimes I stayed a weekend, sometimes weeks. Once, I stayed 26 days straight. I learned to pack fast, to travel light, because there was never any warning. My grandfather, Harold, never asked questions. He just opened the door, heated up canned ravioli or grilled cheese, and let me stay up late watching old westerns with him. He never made me feel like a burden. But I wasn't stupid. I knew I wasn't there for fun. I was there because my parents believed my presence could literally put my brother in the hospital. At home, nothing was ever about me. My mother's entire day revolved around Chase's medication schedule. My father installed hospital-grade filters on the furnace and mounted a baby monitor in Chase's bedroom so they could watch him sleep. If I walked too loudly down the hallway, I was shushed. If I sneezed, the backpack appeared before the sound finished. I stopped telling them when I got sick. I swallowed coughs until my throat burned, because if Chase caught anything, even by coincidence, it would still somehow be my fault. They justified it out loud every time. Chase needs absolute calm. Dominique is independent. She's fine at Grandpa Harold's. She understands her brother is fragile. I was a child. I didn't understand fragility. I understood that being healthy made me dangerous. By 9, I could pack that backpack blindfolded. By 10, I stopped asking when I was coming home. I just waited for the phone call. Chase is stable now. You can come back. Most times, I returned to a house that still smelled like bleach, and a brother who got hugged the second he saw me, while I was told to go wash my hands because I'd been outside. My grandfather was the only one who ever asked how school was, or what I wanted for dinner. He'd sit with me on his porch swing and say, "They love you, Dom. They're just scared." Maybe he believed that. But fear doesn't feel like love when you're the one being shipped away every time your sibling coughs. As I got older, one truth became painfully clear. If I wanted a life that wasn't measured in asthma attacks and medical emergencies, I would have to build it myself. High school became a countdown. Every honor roll certificate, every scholarship application, every late night studying while my parents hovered over Chase's inhaler. I filled out everything myself. College applications, financial aid forms, recommendation requests. My parents didn't know the deadlines. They never asked. Junior year, I was accepted to the University of Chicago on a full scholarship. Tuition, room, board, books, everything covered. I printed the acceptance letter at the library because we didn't own a printer. When I showed it to my parents at dinner, my mom glanced up briefly and said, "That's nice, honey, but it's so far. What if Chase has an attack and needs us?" My dad added that they couldn't help with moving costs. Chase's new nebulizer was $800. Chase smirked and asked if he could have my bedroom for a gaming setup. That was the moment something inside me hardened. Graduation day came quietly. I wore a cap and gown I'd paid for with diner tips, walked across the stage as valedictorian, and looked out at 300 folding chairs, every single one of them empty. An hour before the ceremony, my mom texted me. "Chase is wheezing again. We're taking him to urgent care. We're so sorry, honey." No photo, no call. No one came. I folded the message away like I folded everything else, neatly, without letting it show. Meanwhile, Chase got treated like royalty at his own school. Teachers let him turn in assignments weeks late. He missed entire months and still passed because my mom wrote doctor's notes that said stress made him sick. When he turned 16, my parents bought him a brand new Jeep, paid in cash, because public transportation could expose him to germs. I was still riding the city bus, 2 transfers each way, to get to my weekend job. That job was at Millie's Diner on the South Side. 24 hours, grease thick enough to taste in the air, coffee that could strip paint. I started there at 14 with a worker's permit, pouring coffee, wiping tables, learning how to smile when men twice my age called me sweetheart and snapped their fingers for refills. I counted every dollar: textbooks, dorm deposits, application fees. The owner, Mrs. Alvarez, slipped me extra tips and leftover pie on nights when I looked especially tired. My parents never asked where the money came from. They assumed I was out with friends. I stacked cash in a shoebox under my bed and watched the calendar. Every accepted student day, I went alone. Every campus tour, I paid for myself. Every deposit wired from the Western Union inside the corner store. The day I moved into my dorm, my parents couldn't come. Chase was back in the ER. My Uncle Kevin drove me instead. Before he left, He handed me $500 in cash. "Your grandpa's been saving this from his pension," he said quietly. "He wanted you to have something that was yours." That money bought my first real laptop. College felt like freedom wrapped in exhaustion. 8 a.m. lectures, library until it closed, then closing shifts at the campus cafe to cover whatever my scholarship didn't. I never told my parents my class schedule. They never asked. When I made Dean's List every semester, the certificates went into a folder they never saw. When Chase flunked his first year of community college, they paid for tutors and a new gaming laptop to reduce stress. By senior year, I was running on caffeine and stubbornness. I graduated summa cum laude. Again. And again, my family's seats were empty. This time, the excuse was spring pollen triggering Chase's breathing. I took a selfie on the quad by myself, smiled for no one, and made myself a promise. From that day forward, my achievements would belong only to me. The month I graduated, I walked into a tiny roastery in Wicker Park, looking for any job that paid more than minimum wage. The place was called Bean and Leaf. 400 square feet, cracked tile floor, one vintage Probat roaster that sounded like a jet engine, a handwritten menu taped above the register. Marco, the owner, hired me that afternoon. I told him I could open at 5:30 a.m. and close at 10 without complaining. For the first 6 months, I practically lived there. I kept a sleeping bag and a yoga mat rolled up under the prep counter, crashed there when the last train left, woke up at 4:15 every morning to fire up the roaster before deliveries arrived. I was on my feet from dawn to night, sometimes later if we ran out of a single origin batch. My hands blistered from tamping. My forearms burned from steaming milk. My shoes were permanently soaked in spilled oat milk. I tasted every bean that came through the door. Ethiopian naturals that tasted like blueberries and champagne. Costa Rican honeys with peach and jasmine. Panama geisha that cost more per pound than filet mignon. Customers started asking for the girl who knows the Ethiopians. They waited when the line stretched outside. I kept a black notebook behind the register. Every extraction time, every ratio, every note that made someone close their eyes and whisper, "Damn." After closing, I stayed alone, dialing in new blends on the spare machine, cleaning grinders, tweaking variables until 2 in the morning. Marco gave me a key. "Lock up when you're done," he said. Some nights, I never left. That's when Paul started coming in. Every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 7:12 a.m., navy suit, perfect haircut, double ristretto, ceramic cup, no sugar, no milk. After 3 months, he noticed the sleeping bag under the counter. "Why are you living like a fugitive?" he asked. I laughed it off. Then I told him the truth. I was trying to build something nobody could take from me. He finished his espresso, slid a cream-colored business card across the bar, and said, "Call me when you have something to show." 9 months later, I did. A 53-page pitch deck I'd written on the red line between double shifts. Small footprint shops, obsessive direct trade sourcing, baristas trained like sommeliers, pricing 20% above market because quality isn't cheap. Paul read it overnight. The next week, he introduced me to 2 angel investors. They wrote a $300,000 check on a napkin at the same counter I used to sleep under. 18 months later, the first Northlight Coffee opened in Logan Square. 800 square feet, reclaimed wood bars, no chairs, pour-over stations like altars. We sold out of beans on day 3. Location 2 launched 11 months later, then another and another. Each store funded the next. By year 5, we raised a proper seed round, $4 million. By year 7, a Series A, then Series B. 90 million post-money valuation, 9 stores across 6 states. Every location profitable within 6 months. And through all of it, I never said a word at home. When my mom asked what I did, I said I managed a few cafes. My dad grunted. Sounds stable. Chase rolled his eyes and called me coffee girl. And I let them believe it. At 28, Northlight finally hit consistent 8-figure revenue. On paper, the numbers looked unreal. In real life, nothing about me changed. I still lived in the same 1-bedroom apartment in Logan Square. Still drove a 5-year-old Honda. Still wore the same black jeans until they ripped at the knees. I told myself it was discipline. The truth was simpler. Staying small felt safer. That was the year my mom called me crying. The mortgage was behind. Chase had totaled his second Jeep. Insurance wouldn't cover everything. My dad's hours at the warehouse had been cut. They were 2 months late, and the bank was sending letters. I listened to her sob for 20 minutes without interrupting. Then I opened my banking app and set up a recurring transfer. $8,000. On the first of every month, straight into their joint checking account. I labeled it D. Shaw, bonus plus overtime pay. Normal, invisible, believable. They never asked how a cafe manager could afford that kind of money. My mom just texted back a string of heart emojis and said, God blesses people who work hard. The overdue notices stopped within weeks. My dad bought a new grill. Chase posted Instagram stories from Florida that spring. Life went back to normal for them. I kept the transfers going. 1 year became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 8. 96 payments. $768,000. Money wired while I sat in first class, flying to close another round. Every month, my mom would call to tell me how proud she was that I was finally making decent money at the coffee shop. My dad bragged to his friends that his daughter was sending home a little something. Chase bought a Rolex and told people his big sister hooked him up. Sunday dinners never changed. I showed up in leggings and a hoodie, carrying a cheap bottle of wine. My mom hugged me and whispered how grateful they were. Then spent the rest of the night asking Chase about his job prospects or latest girlfriend. My dad patted my shoulder and said, Keep grinding, kiddo. You're doing better than we ever expected. Chase called me Caffeine Queen and laughed like it was hilarious. They pitied me. The unmarried daughter in her 30s, still working with her hands, probably going home smelling like steamed milk every night. My mom tried to set me up with her hairdresser's nephew. Twice. My dad asked if I needed help applying for something more stable. I smiled, said I was fine, and scheduled the next transfer. I told myself $8,000 a month was the price of peace. I could afford it, and they never had to know where it really came from. Every Christmas, my mom hung an ornament that said, "Family is everything." The ornament fund was my silent wire transfer. I wore the broke barista mask so well it felt custom-tailored. Messy bun, no jewelry, cracked phone screen. When Forbes ran a short piece on fast-growing Midwest coffee brands and quoted Northlight CEO Dominique Shaw, I made sure no one at home ever saw it. When we hit the Inc. 5000 list, I celebrated alone with takeout on my couch. Keeping the secret became its own addiction. Watching them spend my money while treating me like the family charity case was twisted, but it was mine. For once, I controlled the story they told about me. Then, this Christmas, I made a mistake. I offered to host. For the first time in my life, I told my mom I wanted to take everything off her plate. Venue, food, drinks, all of it. She protested about money. I cut her off and said I'd been putting a little aside every month. She cried on the phone and told everyone how proud she was that I was finally doing something special with my cafe job. I booked the winter garden room at the Langham, floor-to-ceiling glass, a 15-foot Fraser fir dripping in crystal ornaments, heated marble floors, dedicated staff, full tasting menu, champagne towers, gold-rimmed plates. Final invoice? $38,000 before tip. I paid it with the same card I used to order coffee beans. 24 guests confirmed. Mom, Dad, Chase, aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. I wore a simple charcoal cashmere dress, low heels, same messy bun they'd seen for years. Everyone walked in gasping. My mom hugged me 3 times and whispered that I must have worked triple shifts for months. Chase strutted around in a brand new Canada Goose jacket, telling cousins his sister had finally leveled up. Dinner flowed perfectly. Then Chase grabbed my phone. He'd known my passcode since we were kids. He connected it to the speakers, and that's when the notification slid down the screen. Northlight Coffee. Final term sheet signed. Post-money valuation, $90 million. Silence swallowed the room. Chase read it out loud, slowly, stumbling over the zeros. Every head turned. My mom dropped her champagne flute. My dad's fork clattered against porcelain. I walked over, took the phone from Chase's hand, and turned off the screen. No, I said calmly. It's not a joke. That's when the table exploded. They demanded shares, money, control. They told me to step down, to make Chase CEO, to do what decent people do. They said I owed them everything. And for the first time in my life, I didn't apologize. I smiled. And I said I was done paying for the privilege of being invisible. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list numbers. I didn't defend myself. I looked at my father's bleeding hand, my mother's ruined mascara, my brother's face already calculating how much of me he could own, and I realized something with terrifying clarity. They didn't see me. They saw a vault. I took a slow breath and said the calmest sentence I'd ever spoken. Northlight Coffee is not your inheritance. It is not your promotion. And it is not your story to rewrite. It's mine. And I'm done paying for the privilege of being invisible in my own family. You could have heard a snowflake land. 3 days later, they showed up at headquarters, unannounced. My parents, Chase, 2 aunts, 1 uncle. They pushed past reception, shouting that they were family and had every right to be there. Employees froze. Phones came out. Investors started whispering. I was pulled out of a board meeting just as my dad began yelling at security. That's when Cole stepped off the elevator. Cole was my cousin, Uncle Kevin's son, 34, senior litigation partner at one of the biggest firms in Chicago. He didn't raise his voice. He handed my dad a thick envelope. "Temporary restraining order," he said calmly. "Signed this morning. You are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Dominique Shaw, her residence, or any Northlight Coffee location." My dad tried to shove the papers back. "This is our daughter." Cole didn't blink. "Then act like parents instead of extortionists." I opened my banking app, ended the recurring transfer. 8 years, 96 payments, $768,000. Gone with one tap. My mother made a sound like someone had knocked the air out of her. Security escorted them out. 4 months later, the foreclosure notice was taped to their front door. Without the $8,000 a month they'd treated like a permanent allowance, the mortgage collapsed fast. Warnings, deadlines, auction date. They lost the house in late spring. Chase kept his marketing job for exactly 9 weeks. Then he posted a 47-minute Facebook Live titled, "My Sister Stole Our Family Fortune." His company fired him the same afternoon. Last I heard, he was driving for a rideshare app and living in a studio smaller than my old walk-in closet. I changed every number, every email, every access point. My mother sent letters to corporate headquarters. They went straight to Cole. My father showed up drunk at one store and got escorted out by police. The restraining order became permanent. 6 months later, in September, I launched the Northlight Children's Fund. $5 million to start. We pay for therapy, emergency housing, and full-ride scholarships for kids who grew up as the family's scapegoat, while another sibling was placed on a pedestal. The first recipient was a girl from Milwaukee whose parents spent her entire childhood telling her she mattered less because her brother had asthma. Her college acceptance letter is framed above my desk. People like to say you only get one family. Maybe that's true for them. For me, family is the people who see your worth without trying to take it from you. I built Northlight with frozen hands at 4 a.m, with missed birthdays, with years of being underestimated and quietly erased. Nobody gets to claim it now. Not for money, not for guilt, not for blood. Blood may be thick, but peace is thicker. And for the first time in 36 years, I finally have mine.